Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. Micaiah Gray is a Christian marriage coach and the host of the United Christian Marriage podcast. She helps Christian spouses with past trauma come together, heal, and learn to thrive in their marriage again. Through her coaching program, she helps spouses go from disconnected and argumentative to thriving, secure, and full of love for each other. Now, before we hear from Micaiah, did you know I created some warrior words t-shirts and hats and mugs and I don't know, tumblers and things? You can find those and more in my Fourth Wall shop. The link is kind of long, so I'm just going to post that in the description under merch shop, and it's Fourth Wall. So you can wear your warrior wings or carry your warrior sword wherever you go. And if you decide to pick something up, post it on Instagram and tag me at My Warrior Words. Now, grab a tissue and join Micaiah and me as we talk about how a turbulent childhood led to a difficult start to her marriage. But what that marriage led to is helping others thrive today. Let's rock. Welcome, everyone, to the Warrior Words podcast, and welcome, Micaiah Gray. We are happy to have you here today.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you, Heather.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us. So a lot of people know that we do a little bit of prep before recording. And one of the things that you shared was that you are now living the dream that you had as a little girl. But you also shared that as a little girl, that dream just wasn't materializing as you had dreamt it. So could you start us off with what that dream was, or, some aspects of what you dreamed about as a little girl, and then we can move into what actually happened.
Yeah, I'd love to. So what I was referencing in that is my time in foster care. I was in foster care for about 2 years, and I remember just like longing for a family that was my own, like a safe place, a home. And I missed my family, obviously, but I think I got to a point where I realized like I probably wasn't going back. And I started to accept that. And so that was scary as a, 6-year-old trying to figure out like what the future looked like. And now living in my dream, like I have that family, and it's not just a family, but like a strong Christian family. We're very rooted in our faith, and knowing that I never had a healthy marriage like role modeled for me. So for me to have a marriage where we both had past trauma, and so we both understand what that's like, we've had to unpack our trauma, but it doesn't define where we're at. It doesn't define us. And we've been able to have very vulnerable and open conversations about that. And we are both on the same page. Like we know what each other's gone through. We've shared things that we never thought we'd share with anyone. And there's always stuff that's probably left to heal, that slowly
Right.
gets unpacked over the years. But we've done so much of it to the point where we're not living in misery the way that we were in the past, where it was like a constant dysfunction in our lives. And now it's something that is mostly healed. And when it comes up, we know how to deal with it. So that's been huge because, like I said, we weren't there before. We struggled in a lot of areas, like emotional resiliency, not being argumentative. We struggle with our mindset, like getting out of survival mode and like constantly searching for danger. Like that was where we were stuck for a long time. And so for us to be able to buy our first home and to live in an area that feels safe for us, like we're not surrounded by external violence, like we've made our home internally a safe place as well, and just work through a lot of things, especially because we both came from families where anger was like externally shown a lot. Vocally and sometimes physically. And so we grew up witnessing that. And then we started to be angry ourselves just through everything we went through and not being taught how to process those things or handle the emotions that come up. And I believe that most of the time, anger is a cover emotion for like a internal hurt, And so
Mhm.
we both were put in situations where we constantly had to be strong. And so that became almost a protection for us to be angry. And so we've learned so much of how to unpack that and like dial back the anger. And I think one of the hugest things that I've learned, as a part of our coaching curriculum in the emotions section, is it teaches that for you to process your anger, you actually don't have to physically do anything. But we grow up in a culture that teaches us like to get your anger out or to get your emotion out, you need to physically move. Like, and that's what leads to, violent situations. And not to say that there isn't healthy ways of doing that, right? Like some
Right.
people box or they run or they all
Mhm.
those things, but you actually can process and feel your emotion without doing it externally, like actually moving your body. And so that's been life changing for us as well. And so that's our dream that we're living in. And
Yeah.
we're moving more and more into that every day. And as I look like backwards to where I was, it really just feels like such a blessing to know that it's even possible to get from point A to point B. And when you're in it, it may not feel possible. I think there's definitely some times where it felt like that would never happen for me, or it was really far off. And then it didn't end up being as far off as I thought it was going to be.
Well, you mentioned that you were 6 and you were in foster care for about 2 years. So 6 to 8, that's just a really young, and they say the age of reason is 7.
Mhm.
So, you're kind of on both sides of that in that 2 year period, and it's very formative. And you're
Yeah.
not in a stable environment, and you've got the trauma of the past, the 6 to 8 years prior, and then the uncertainty of what is going to happen next. Would you mind sharing maybe a little bit of the trauma and the anger that you grew up with, and maybe like what happened after foster care, after those 2 years that brought you here?
Yeah. So a lot. Um, I would love to tell you that it was just one peak traumatic event, but it really was
Yeah.
birth to adulthood, unfortunately. So in actually it started in the womb. So let's go how
Oh
it.
no.
Okay, so my parents were actually drug addicts and alcoholics. They had substance abuse problems and they were kind of on and off with it. Um, from what I've been told, they met through their drug dealer. So, the typical romance. No, just kidding. um,
Oh yeah.
so they met, they both had these issues. They got pregnant with me very quickly. My dad had just gone through a divorce, so he had a past wife and three older grown kids, and then they got pregnant with me. It happened almost immediately, and my dad had been abusive in his past relationship. When they got pregnant with me, because it was so quick, he thought that I was not his and that she had been with someone else and it was someone else's kid. And she kept trying to assure him that it was his. And so there was some abuse even during the pregnancy. Um, and from how it's been told to me from different perspectives, he usually wasn't abusive if he was sober, but it was those moments, when he was drinking or on something that things would get out of hand. And he that continued on. It's funny enough, I came out looking exactly like my father. So like once I was out of the womb, there was no denying that I was his kid. And they ended up having my sister, and then I actually went into foster care at 5. So like 6 was the middle of it. It was like 5 to right before I turned 8. And so the first 5 years was with them. And in that time, like we lived in complete dysfunction. My dad was like very hoardery, so we just had stuff everywhere. Nothing was kept clean. They were very unpredictable. I had a older sister on my biological mom's side who stayed with us half of the time and was with her biological father half the time.
Mhm.
And she ended up parenting half the time. And then I had a grandma who we would spend weekends with her. And she was the one who originally took us to church and like got us involved in Awanas and that sort of thing. And she was our safe place. There was nothing really went wrong at grandma's house, but it was like when we were at home, it was a different story. And I remember just eating things out of the can, like eating chicken pot pies in bed and watching our little square SpongeBob TV, And so that's what I knew for the first 5 years of my life. Complete dysfunction. Nothing was ever the same. Um, but I know that they weren't in the right mind and there was a lot going on there. I'm able to have grace for them now, but I certainly did not always have that grace for them. Um, and then I went to foster care for 2 years. There was some things that happened in foster care. Um, I was grateful that I got to stay with my sister the whole time. We never got separated, and we were between two houses. We were in one, went to another, and went back to the first one. And they were considering adopting us, but then my older sister, had been trying to get us, but she was very close to my dad, and since he had his rights removed, the courts wouldn't let her take us. But his ex-wife was living like an hour away from everyone, and was kind of like distanced, and she was trying to get us. She didn't have any kids in the home at the time because her 3 had moved out, and so she ended up being able to adopt us. And so then we were kind of like put in a situation of like, do you want us to adopt you or do you want to go with her? And I remember feeling like, I don't know. Like, even at the time, I didn't think I was equipped to make that decision. And looking
No,
back, I'm like,
what, you were 7, 8?
yeah, I would have been probably 7. And looking back, I'm like, I don't know if they just asked me that, like, to make me feel important or like, who
Mhm.
was really making the decision in that. But looking back, I'm like, I don't think I was equipped to be making that decision. But um, we started doing visitations and kind of like easing into it. And then it started as like day visitations and then weekend visitations to then us moving in, switching schools, and getting ready to go to court to finalize the adoption. So we're with her, and there was a lot of like healing that had to take place because I remember she told me that I would just constantly say, like, I felt ugly. And she would try to say, oh, like, you're really pretty or like, you're gorgeous. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I would fight her on it. And I just never could wrap my head around it.
Mhm.
And I don't think she ever realized how many like trust issues I had coming out of foster care. Because at that time, I think like she went into the adoption wanting us to feel normal, which was like an innocent want on her part, right? Like she
Mhm.
wanted us to feel like normal kids and to finally give us a normal life. But what I feel like that was a downside in the sense that we didn't get put through like therapy or anything to like help us transition out of that. We had,
Right.
our counselors when we were in, but in all honesty, we really didn't like our counselor and we didn't trust her. And when we brought issues to her, she ignored them. And so um, we didn't well, I know, and my sister would probably agree that we didn't really get that transition phase to decompress like what had happened and process it and get that out. And
Right.
so I remember just not trusting anyone at this point. And my sister was a year and a half younger than me. So, like, I was just constantly in like this mom mode over her instead of being able to see her as like this equal and she's my sister and we're in this together. I felt like I was like I had to mother her because it was almost like this expectation like when you go into foster care, take care of your sister. And so I took on that role and that was like heavy in and of itself.
Yeah, of
But then,
course.
and so I felt like I had this constant anxiety of like trying to be an adult when I shouldn't have had to be, all these things that shouldn't have been on me. We kind of just started normal life and she tried to help us like get into a normal routine and things were good. But then my grandpa got sick. So my adoptive mom's dad, he got sick, he had cancer, and we ended up moving closer down to our other family so that we could be with him. And that ended up being a really hard transition between like switching schools. And at this point, I'd moved schools constantly. Like, I don't think that I ever stayed at school more than 2 years my entire life. Like, it was
Mhm.
just, there was a lot of moving. Even though it wasn't like long distance moving, it was just ping ponging around. I never got to settle in anywhere. And
Right.
I never really found a place I felt I belonged. Like, I never had that sense of belonging and peace a couple, like a year or so after we had moved, we finally got settled into a home, like bought one, and we were like, okay, we're staying here for a little while. And at this point, I think I was like coming up into the age of like 10. So, like, I'm starting to get into that like pre puberty phase where things are like happening and there's hormones moving and you start to get moody and like recede to your bedroom and you don't want to talk to people. Like, I was starting to get there. And obviously I'd never gone through puberty before, so I
Right. We do that
didn't,
once.
yeah, I didn't understand what was happening. And then on top of that, I had this past trauma that like kind of just got shoved under the rug. And I didn't know what trauma even meant. Like at that point,
Right.
I was so undereducated about these things. Like, um, they don't, they should, but they don't explain this to kids who are coming out and of this foster care transition. Like, what's going to happen, what's going to come up for you. Like no one told me you're going to go through this, this, and this, and this is how you deal with it. Like I was
Mhm.
completely unprepared. And so my mom saw the changes in me, but I think she just chalked it up to like normal preteen behavior. Like
Okay.
I don't think that she knew the depths of what was happening, but for me it was so much worse than that. Like I remember there was a moment where I got caught looking up sexual stuff on like my iPod or something on the internet. And I was scared to like admit that I knew what it was and that I was curious about it. Um, and so I lied because I was so ashamed and I was so afraid. I remember just saying like, oh, I heard someone say it and I wanted to know what it was. So I looked it up like, and I just tried to like write it off. And my mom was like, completely unprepared for that, and it made her very fearful, and I can't tell you exactly what was going through her head because I've never asked her, but I just know that she wasn't proactive about it, it was very reactive. Like we had an entire blow up about it. There was lots of like yelling, angry responses. She told me that if I didn't stop I might end up being trafficked, and then she went into like detail of telling me about sex trafficking. And I'm sure it was coming out of a place of like her being afraid because she loved me, but it was very not helpful for me in that situation. It
No.
just added to that trauma, like it was just another
Right.
thing to
It
burden
was
me with.
yeah, another piece of truly heavy information to put on a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of adults who don't know a lot about trafficking. And to put that burden on a 10-year-old. And you're right. She's probably coming from a place of love. Maybe if I scare her enough, she'll stay away and and that's it. But yeah, that's very heavy to put on someone so young. Yeah.
Yeah. So, It was around that age that a lot of stuff happened. That was one of the things. There was another instance where we weren't supposed to be seeing our biological father because his rights were removed, and so we legally weren't supposed to see him until we were 18 or older. And he was just around. He saw other people in our family, and so sometimes we saw him. And my mom would never put us into a room with him if we didn't want to be there. Like she
Mhm.
always gave us the choice, but it was always like with the understanding of like this is we do this quietly because it's technically we're not supposed to. And so we were never left alone with him. It was never anything like that. But like if it was a birthday party or something, he might be around and we weren't expected to stay if we were uncomfortable. Well, we had kind of like seen our dad go through these phases because we'd seen him around a little bit and we just knew like we didn't really trust him. He wasn't a dependable person. He wasn't really a father figure, but we felt bad because we could see that like he wanted to see us in our life sometimes. And like you could see the sadness and I was very empathetic towards him. And so I really did. I prayed hard for him and like I had this hope that like he would turn his life around. And I think after a while I got angry. I stopped hoping because there was nothing changing. And it would seem like something was changing and then it would go, that's when the worst thing happened. And so it was these repeated events where I was just learning to stuff everything in and I never truly felt like I had a safe place to let it out. And
Right.
so that adds up, you know?
Yeah, it does. It does. So
Yeah.
you have all of these events that you are stuffing that are traumatic and chaotic and nobody's helping you process it or learn from it. Um, how how did you end up with your husband and in such a healthy marriage?
I had no choice is kind of the short answer. Like,
Okay.
yes, we always have a choice.
Yes.
Obviously, but I don't remember the exact sequence, but I just remember one night around the fifth grade, laying in bed and thinking, oh my gosh, my parents didn't love me. If they loved me, they would have got their act together. And so that was a big part of like what I turned into as a teenager. And I was not a perfect child by any means. Like, I definitely gave my mom lots of trouble, but there was also so many other things that like were going on. Like, I wasn't just
Mhm.
trying to be bad, you know? So,
Right.
um,
Well, you didn't grow up with the tools that you needed to handle all of this stuff and to
yeah.
handle what comes in the teenage years. So yeah, that's
And
understandable.
unfortunately, she did not have the tools either. And so, um, we fought like pretty much from that point until, you know, the end. We right now do not have a relationship. We're just until something changes, you know, there has to be boundaries. So
Right.
that's where I'm at now. But like there was a couple like sexual assault things and stuff that went on through my teenage years, like under my mom's roof, right? Like I felt like at the time, I felt like she should have been more protective of who was allowed into our home.
Hmm.
And I didn't feel like that boundary was protected the way it should have been. And it pretty much ended with me being 17 and no longer being able to stay at my house as a safe place anymore because I told my mom about something that had been going on with a family member and how, you know, they were sexualizing me and it was inappropriate contact and like all these. I didn't go into detail to tell her because when I told her, I was mad at this point. Okay, so I was using concise words and I was like, they're a pedophile, don't want to be around them anymore. That's all I said. And I didn't really want to talk about it. I just wanted there not to be a question if I didn't want to show up at that family thing because so and so was going to be there. So like that was my intent. I did not go into it wanting to cause family drama, but I think that's what she saw it as is like, oh,
Right.
it's just another thing that you're doing to get attention. And I'm like, you know, so that was hard for me. I felt completely unheard and unseen. And um that day it didn't get brought up again. But it was like weeks later, then something got said that wasn't even directly about that, but was connected. And then next thing I know, she was blowing up at me. And I was like, okay, well, if this isn't a boundary that's going to be honored, then this isn't a safe place for me to live anymore. And so I pretty much told her I'm leaving and I'm calling CPS. And she obviously did not receive that very well. We did end up like shoving each other back and forth, but like that was the most physical we'd ever been. And I'm glad that it never went past that point, but I pretty much just grabbed what I could and I left. And I was like homeless for the first time, it felt like, because even when I was in foster care, like I was given a bed, you know, and at this point I was felt so alone and it felt like the lowest moment in my life and no one was there for me. Like no one. And my mom's the type of person where she like calls someone right away. So I knew that everyone was gonna know pretty quickly. And nobody reached out. Nobody said a thing. I have four older siblings total, probably three of them heard about it. Plus, you know, there's spouses and their kids, and so there was all these things, and like nobody reached out to me, not a single person. The only person who talked to me through this was my little sister, because we were the closest, and then one of my older brothers. Eventually, like I talked to him about it, but nobody got my side of the story. Nobody cared to ask. Nobody reached out to see if I was okay. And I can't tell you what everyone's thinking because I don't know what my mom said to anyone. Like
Right.
it was never told to me. I don't know how she interpreted it, what she thought was going on, or how she worded it to others. But I just remember feeling like so alone that when I left that day, I was driving, like bawling my eyes out, the worst anxiety and pain that I've ever felt. Just like I felt like I was literally going to have a heart attack from the amount of pain that was radiating in my chest. And I was driving and I was like, my car's small enough, I could just drive really fast into something and I'd probably die. Like I was literally thinking about committing suicide. And I think I would have actually done it if I wouldn't have called someone and they picked up the phone. And I really like am so grateful to this day that someone picked up the phone right when I needed them to. And I was able to, you know, like find a place to sleep. And I stayed with friends for a couple weeks before one of my older siblings was like, you can stay in one of my apartments because he like owned a rental place. And there 3 months later, I think, that I met my husband. So this all happened pretty close together. And right before that, I just gotten out of like one of my first serious relationships. Like we had a bad breakup. So it was a lot of things that happening.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I was living on my own. I had no financial assistance. I mean, I was maybe eating one meal a day. And so it was rough. And I was in my senior year, so trying to wrap up high school, and I was in career center doing cosmetology. And so I was working like extra hours to get my cosmetology hours. And so then on top of all that, you know, just a lot. So then I was working as many hours as I could around my school hours, which was really hard because like I had wonky hours because of my career center stuff. And then, you know, is life's expensive. So I didn't have to pay for like the apartment,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but I had to pay for my own food, my own gas, like my own phone bill, like that sort of thing. And so I was just scraping by, surviving. And but it was weird because even though I was still in survival mode a little bit, it was the first time that I truly started to feel safe because I had my own space. And getting out of the toxic environment that I had been in so long, where it was just constant traumas happening back to back, just started crying again. Like for the longest time, I would have to try to force myself to cry, or like I would go forever without crying, and then like it would just come. But it was like all of a sudden I was crying every day. And it was like this intense sadness that I think most people don't talk about this, but if you're in survival mode for so long, like when you get out of it, it's like it all hits you because you had to shut it. You had to shut everything down and just do the bare minimal survival for so long.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then you transition and it all still has to be processed, right? So it comes up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's a
still in
lot.
there. It's
Yeah.
still in there. Yeah. And you're talking at 17 years worth at this point too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Meet my husband. Boom, pregnant. My senior year, living alone, can't even hardly afford basic living. I mean, it was bad. And now I'm pregnant. And so it was immediately like I had been starving, and then he came into my life, and it was like all of a sudden a man was taking care of me, and I had never been taken care of. Like, I had never been in a place where I felt like someone genuinely cared about my safety and about meeting my needs. And while like my mom had met like my physical needs, like she fed us, kept us warm
Right.
and safe under a roof, but it was like emotionally unsafe constantly. And then it was like being with him, even though, don't get me wrong, because like we had angry outbursts, we had things we fought over. Like there were some really hard moments. We broke up twice, and we were like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" But we just kept coming back together because it was the first time that we met someone where we like shared our trauma experiences, and we realized like we you could say we trauma bonded a little bit, which sometimes people act like that's a bad thing. It wasn't a bad thing for us. Like I can see how it could be in certain circumstances, like if you're already married and you trauma bond with someone else, or
Yeah.
like if there's
Right.
weird dynamics. But for us, it was the first time that we felt safe and truly connected to someone who we knew understood the experiences that we had gone through and was not judging the other person for what had happened to them or how they had responded in those situations. We had both also had gone through bad breakups recently, and so like we got to share that experience as well. It's like in it people were it wasn't really rebounding. That's not really what it was doing. It was like we empathize with each other on a deeper level because we're like, yeah, I went through that too. Even though there was like things that were a little different, it was just this common thread of like, I'm sticking with you. And I think that's truly what got us through is our faith, and the fact that we knew we wanted to be with one person and we didn't want to keep reinventing the wheel. Like we didn't have the energy in us to keep dating forever. And like at this point, we're still young. So like, you're like forever, whatever. Like, but at this point, our lives had been so heavy, it felt like forever. Like, it felt like we had been waiting for some place safe to come, and it didn't come for the first 17 years of our lives. And then suddenly we found someone who genuinely cared about us. And he met all of my physical needs in a time when no one else was. And I met all of his emotional needs at a time when no one else was. And so we came in and we filled the pieces, and then we got to heal together. And that was messy, but it was beautiful, like within the messy, if that makes sense.
It does. It's one of the things that I like to talk about is that there's always beauty, even in the mess, even in the suffering and the pain, you can always find something,
Yes,
so it's not always easy, but it's always there. So yes.
exactly.
So, so,
So that's how it happened.
so so you healed or not healed. Healed is rather definitive when I think healing kind of I think it's a lifetime thing because just like learning and loving, there's always something to do. Um, and as imperfect human beings, we still make mistakes that we need to seek forgiveness for and forgive others for. So definitely. So then because you're actually in the marriage industry now. So how did you decide to make that your focus?
So I was doing photography, and that was not fruitful in the way that I thought it was going to be. Like, I thought that was the thing. Um, I was feeling passionate about it. I was like, this would give me the ability to stay home with my babies most of the time and like do this like work from home thing that I was wanting to do. And like my husband wanted the stay-at-home wife and I wanted to be home with the kids, but I also always had this entrepreneurial like passion since I was 16, and I kept like feeling like there was more, but I didn't know. And so I started that and I learned so much doing that, even though it wasn't like financially fruitful. I still learned so many business skills, specifically like online stuff like SEO and that sort of thing. So when we moved, when we finally were able to buy our house, and we moved about an hour away from where we had lived, so there was like no one here that we knew. And it's a very small town, which is what we were wanting, but obviously there's pros and cons to not knowing anyone.
Yes, yes.
And that led to some complications. Our youngest was still breastfeeding and we didn't know, but he wasn't getting enough. And so while we were moving and we were really busy and things were crazy, he like it got missed. And then it got to a point where we're like, he looks thin. I don't think this is normal. So we took him to the doctor, and it ended up being the last time he was there, they had seen the dip, but it was a different doctor. They didn't compare it to his weight to the chart. So it got missed and it didn't get pointed out to us. And then it was very obvious by the time we took it in. And we had to immediately start supplementing with formula. And it was this whole process that we had to go through. And so we're adjusting to our new house, trying to get moved in. Our old house was in, and so when we moved, I was so ready for that change. And then we went through this hiccup, and I was like, you got to be kidding me, another thing, you know? But what that led to was the Lord, like, kind of, I had to put my photography business off. Like, I had no choice at that point. And I was just getting to the point where I thought I was about to grow. Like, I was like, this is the point where I'm going to be scaling this. Like, this is going to work. And then it was like, no, actually, I have to put this on the back burner because my child needs all of my attention right now. Like, this is going to take everything in me to reestablish breastfeeding and get him to a healthy weight. And so I put everything on hold. And then by the time he was good again and he was ready to be on his own and start drinking, like milk or, milk and breast milk, like the whole process, then I started looking back at what that was going to look like for me now. And I realized that I had no passion to go back to what I was doing. Zero. And I had also been very bad at prioritizing like that balance of working from home and working in the home and being with my kids and giving my husband what he needs. Like my balance was completely skewed. I was like on my computer way too much, and I was like putting other things off, and it felt so urgent. And then when I had that distance, I got to like have that sight. And so I didn't know what it was going to look like, and I prayed really hard about that. And I felt the Lord call me to start a podcast. And so I kept seeing all these things like start a podcast here, start a podcast there. I'm like, okay, are you trying to tell me something? And it kept going on.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, what is it going to be about? So then I went to this like boot camp training and I did all these things, and I heard the Lord say reviving Christian families. And that was initially how I launched my podcast, because I tried to look at like what we went through, and I was like, oh, well, that's kind of like what came to me was like helping other families who've gone through trauma not repeat that like generational cycle of like passing those things down to their kids. But then once I launched, I realized like people don't always know what that means. They don't understand some of the bigger terms, and like reviving Christian families was too generic for the podcast. So I ended up niching down even further because I realized that even though my big vision is still the same, it all starts with marriage. Like, you have to be united in your marriage. You have to heal together. Like, that's what we did. Even though we were pregnant and then we had a kid very early, like, we didn't really we didn't get to be married without having a kid because we got married 2 months after having a kid. So we were like, it was never separate for us, but there was still so much work that we had to do together apart from parenthood to then really show up well in our parenting and in our home and all the other things. So that's why I niched down to marriage. And I won't tell you the whole story of how I got into the coaching thing. That really was completely God, like just divine intervention moved me into the perfect place at the perfect time where the perfect word was said to me. And then I was jumped into that world, and I'm just wrapped up my coaching certification. So I
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, that's it's been extra special to even watch like what it was like for me to go through the program and then learn more tools, even further beyond what we DIY'd in the beginning at 18.
Yeah.
And so now it just, yeah, I truly believe that to have a strong marriage, the only thing that comes before that is to have a strong faith, really. And that is so incorporated into everything I do because I believe that is the root of everything.
Mhm.
But then, like, having a strong marriage is the second piece if you're married. And that's when everything trickles, like, like into our parenting and our jobs, into all these things, in our, even out into our communities, just being very aligned with God's will for us in our marriage. So,
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, if somebody wants to listen to your podcast or if they want to, are you actively coaching now? Because you said you just got certified. Are you actively doing that? Can people come work with you?
yes. So, the podcast is United Christian Marriage. Um, it's available everywhere. So, I'd love for you guys to come listen. I do mostly solo episodes for wives, and then I bring my husband on. I try to do that, pretty frequently. We're just kind of dipping our toes into that more,
Mhm.
um, to really give the men's perspective. So, like, here's this episode, grab your husband, listen together, that sort of thing. And then as far as coaching, I'm currently offering free calls to really like let people get a taste of it, see if they want to join my program or not. And I'm not sure how long I'll be doing that, but right now I want to coach as many people as I can and just get the word out there. And then I am taking clients for the whole program, which is 6 months long.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so where can they come? Where can they come get more information about that?
Yes, so I believe I gave you my link. Right now I'm working on the official website, so I just have my um, bio site link, which is,
Mhm.
the website bio.site/Micaiah Gray, and it's linked on there. And then it's also under almost all of my podcasts. So,
Okay. Well, I'll make sure I put that in there, and then when you do get your official website done, let me know, and we can update that. So, well, thank you. I do want to ask you one more question before we wrap up, and I ask this of all my guests. So, if somebody is listening who is experiencing or has experienced but not processed that string of traumatic, chaotic events, and they're struggling because they don't have the tools to process, what would you say to that woman who's listening, who really just needs a piece of advice or some encouragement?
first, I would say it's possible. So, let there be hope. Like, let yourself hope again, because I think when we go through trauma, we put the hope aside out of bare necessity, right? Like, sometimes you just need to not think about the future because you just need to survive today, and that's okay. But let yourself hope and dream again. And I think that sometimes we underestimate the beauty and the process of just releasing our thoughts. So, whether that's journaling, praying, talking to a spouse or someone you trust, or even hiring a coach, like really getting things out into the open. And I don't like to say this word, but it's the best way to explain it. Almost doing it like scientifically, in the sense that like you're not shaming yourself, right? So, like, if you think of how a scientist views data, a scientist wouldn't say like I'm overwhelmed with anxiety. A scientist might say, interesting, there's anxiety being experienced here, or there's anxiety being felt here. And it's almost like distancing from you and giving you the permission to not look at your emotions and these things that happen to you as part of your identity, but to just look at it like, interesting, this is a data set. And then there's certainly a time for processing that emotion, right? And like letting yourself feel it, but you don't have to stay there and spiral. And sometimes we mistake spiraling as processing, and they're actually not the same thing. So, like if you're spiraling, you can't really process because you're staying in the same loop. So, um, yeah, that's one of the things that I usually teach people first is like that emotional resiliency part, because once you kind of tone down the emotion, then it's so much easier to be the scientist. But if you can really learn that tool of like, huh, that's interesting. My brain is trying to tell me that I'm worth nothing. And then ask yourself, where does that come from? What are my other options? Instead of saying, like, this is the thought, so this is ultimate truth, and I can't think anything else. This is just who I am. Like, distancing yourself and saying, like, is there more here? If that makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing, things that happened in your past that you probably don't really want to remember, but that are now giving you tools and giving you fuel, if you will, to help others to learn to get those tools and then to learn to process and to have the healthier relationship with themselves and their marriages. So thank you very much, Micaiah. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Micaiah used the term survival mode a couple of times when she was sharing her story with us, and it really stood out to me. When we experience trauma after trauma and exist in an almost constant chaotic environment, that's where we live, in survival mode. And when we are in survival mode, we do just what is necessary to make it through. Sometimes that may be earning just enough money to make sure you can eat. And sometimes it's making that phone call, praying someone picks up the phone. I was so grateful that Micaiah shared that someone picked up the phone precisely when she needed to be heard. That person probably had no idea the impact of this simple action at that moment in time. Micaiah was just trying to survive, and that phone call saved her life. Yet she was still in survival mode. She spent her whole life not feeling seen or heard, not feeling valued, and sometimes feeling outright ignored. She didn't receive the tools necessary to deal with the chaos in her life. Mostly, it seems because the adults in her life didn't have the tools themselves, much less those to help her. But I loved that her warrior words included the word hope. I don't care what the world's gurus say, hope is a strategy. And sometimes hope is all you have, or all you think you have. While she didn't experience it regularly, Micaiah was introduced to faith. She knew her grandmother's home was a safe space, and she knew that's where she was introduced to God. That seed of faith was planted, and it grew into the hope she carried with her. Because of these seeds, because of these seeds that were sown into her life, faith, hope, and someone who cared enough to pick up the phone at the right time, Micaiah was healthy enough to recognize true love when she met her husband. They each had the right seats, or puzzle pieces, if you will, to help each other heal the wounds of their past. Now, as I mentioned in the episode, healing is never really done. It's growth, and it continues. But their shared experiences allowed them to bond, and the healing could then begin. They were better able to help each other when other traumatic things happened, And now they are able to handle these things together. And even more, they are now able to use their combined experiences to help other couples through their marriage podcast and coaching. If you resonate at all with Micaiah's story, take her up on her offer. The link is in the show notes. Now, my question for you this week is this: can you hang on to hope as a strategy? Or where do you see hope in your life? Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.